The first person who called Suyin Zhao mother was a 7-year-old girl she had never seen before. The girl was standing beside the man Suyin had crossed an ocean to marry, and Suyin was already wondering how fast she could get back on the train. Because Red Hollow, Wyoming, in January of 1886, looked nothing like the life her family had been promised. It was all steam and coal smoke, boardwalk ice, horse breath in the air, a line of rough wooden buildings under a sky the color of tin. Suyin was 21 years old, from Taishan in Guangdong, and she had traveled so far that the world itself felt used up. She stepped down from the rail car with one small trunk, one rolled wool blanket, and a red silk ribbon her mother had tucked into her hand the night before she left home. Then she looked up. The man waiting for her was taller than she had expected, broad-shouldered, bearded. A dark wool coat dusted with snow. Not handsome in the polished way of photographs, but tired-looking, steady, and careful with his face. His name was Eli Turner. The child beside him had one loose front tooth, a blue knitted cap pulled down over pale ears, and the fearless stare children use when they decide to know the truth before any adult is ready to say it. She looked Suyin over once, from the travel-worn hem of her dress to the braid pinned at the back of her neck, and asked, "Are you my new mama, or did Papa bring the wrong lady?" Suyin did not understand every word, but she understood enough, and something inside her dropped, because she had prepared herself to be a wife, a stranger, a disappointment perhaps. She had not prepared herself to become the answer to a child's grief before her boots had even touched the snow. Eli looked embarrassed at once. "Clara," he said, low and warning. But the little girl kept staring. Suyin tightened her hand around the ribbon from home until it cut into her palm. Then, very softly, in English she had practiced on the ship and the train, she said the only honest thing she had. "You can send me back. I do not belong here." Eli's face changed, not with anger, not with pity, with something quieter than that. "No," he said, "you've come too far for your first hour to decide the rest of your life. Come home first. Be frightened there if you must, but not on a platform." That was how she went with him, not because she trusted him, not because she was brave, because the train that had brought her west was already hissing and shuddering, already preparing to leave, and she could not bear the thought of being left alone in a town where even the cold felt foreign. The Turner cabin stood at the far edge of Red Hollow, beyond the livery, past a stand of cottonwood stripped bare for winter. It was small, whitewashed once, years ago, a porch that leaned slightly to the east, a lantern hook by the door, a woodshed, a paddock. One narrow trail of footprints hardened in the snow. Inside, the air smelled of pine smoke, wet wool, and a house that had been trying very hard not to fall apart. There were only 3 plates on the shelf, 3 mugs, 3 pegs by the door. And yet Suyin noticed something else, a 4th cup set back from the others, not used, not thrown away. Clara saw her looking at it. "That was Mama Anna's," she said. "Papa says we don't move it until we're ready." Suyin looked at the cup, then at the child, then at Eli, who was standing very still near the stove, as though he understood that every object in that room had just become a question. That first night, Suyin did not unpack her trunk. She placed it beside the bed in the small room off the kitchen. She laid the red ribbon on top of it, and she told herself that if the morning felt worse, she would find the station and whatever came after it. But morning came, and instead of sending her away, the child knocked once on the half-open door and asked if Chinese women always braided their hair with ribbon that bright. That was the beginning of everything. The first days were harder than Suyin had feared, and harder still because Eli never once made them harder on purpose. He did not laugh when she fumbled for English words. He did not correct the way she held his heavy frontier knives. He did not complain when she scorched the first pan of biscuits because the iron stove ran hotter than any cooking fire she had known. He only said, "This house has survived worse than bad biscuits." And Clara, who seemed made of questions and elbows, followed Suyin from room to room, as if proximity itself might keep this new arrangement from vanishing. She wanted to know what Suyin called snow in Chinese, why her handwriting looked like tiny fences and rivers, whether all oceans were louder than wind, whether people in China had bedtime stories, whether mothers there tucked blankets the same way. That last question always landed between them with more weight than Clara intended. On the fourth day, Suyin showed her how to fold paper into a rabbit. On the fifth, she tied Clara's hair back with a strip of old cloth, and the girl stood before the cracked hallway mirror as if she had been crowned. On the sixth, Clara asked if she might learn to say Suyin's name properly, instead of swallowing it the way the townspeople did. By the end of the first week, the house had learned a new sound, the startled laugh that escaped Suyin before she had time to hide it. But outside that house, Red Hollow was less kind. At Bell's Mercantile, where Eli took her to buy wool stockings and lamp oil, conversation slowed the moment she entered. An old ranch woman in a sealskin collar pretended not to stare and failed. Two boys near the flour barrels whispered, "China wife," as if they had discovered a circus trick. A man by the stove said, just loud enough to be heard, "Town's changing faster than it ought to." Suyin kept her eyes lowered and counted the boards in the floor. The woman behind the counter, Mrs. Nora Bell, an Irish widow with iron-gray hair and a back like a shovel handle, slammed a tin of nails onto the counter so hard the room jumped. "Then buy your tobacco and go complain to God," she said. "My shop is too small for cowardly men and draft horses both." Nobody answered her. Suyin looked up. Mrs. Bell did not smile. She only measured out tea leaves, wrapped them in brown paper, and slipped the parcel into Suyin's hand as if this were an ordinary kindness and not a rescue. But kindness, Suyin was learning, could feel more dangerous than cruelty. Cruelty asked nothing of her. Kindness made staying possible. That night, after Clara had gone to sleep with the paper rabbit under her pillow, Suyin stood by the stove while Eli split kindling. The firelight moved over the walls. The room was quiet enough to hear the kettle think. And she said, without planning to say it then, "You should send me back before the girl gets used to me." Eli did not turn at once. When he did, there was no offense in his face, only exhaustion and patience. "She is already used to loss," he said. "That's the thing I was hoping to spare her." Suyin stared at him. "I am not your kind of wife." "I didn't ask for a kind," he said. "I asked for a person." She looked away. "I am not her mother." "No," Eli said, "not yet. Maybe not ever in the way she means it right now. She's 7. She thinks naming something makes it stay." That hurt more than if he had lied to her, because it was true. He set the kindling down, lowered his voice. "I did not bring you here to perform a miracle. I brought you here because your letter sounded like someone who knew how to keep going after the world had changed shape. That seemed worth more to me than prettiness or polish." Suyin stood very still. No one had spoken of her that way before. Not as a burden sent, not as a duty arranged, as a person who had survived. But being seen did not make the ache simpler. It sharpened it. The worst of it came on a Sunday. Mrs. Bell had persuaded Suyin to attend the little schoolhouse social because, as she put it, people gossip less effectively when the subject is looking them in the eye. So Suyin went. She wore her dark indigo dress, her best wool shawl, and the red silk ribbon braided carefully into Clara's hair because the girl had begged for it. For 1 hour, it almost felt manageable. Children chased each other between the benches. A fiddle player sawed out old dance tunes. Women passed around slices of molasses cake. Eli stood beside her, not touching, but near enough to say with his body that she had not arrived alone. Then Clara ran up to 2 older girls near the stove and said, with the open pride only children possess, "My new mama tied my ribbon. She says red is for luck." The room did not freeze. That would have been easier. Instead, it shifted by 1 terrible inch. One woman looked down at Clara and then up at Suyin, and her mouth folded into a smile too thin to be kindness. "Children can call anybody mama for a week," she said. "That doesn't make it true." She said it softly, soft enough for dignity, loud enough for damage. Clara heard. Suyin saw the confusion reach the girl's face first, then the hurt. Eli heard it too, because his whole body hardened. But before anyone could speak, Clara turned and walked back to Suyin, slowly this time. She did not cry there, not in front of them. She only took Suyin's hand and held it all the way home. That night, while Eli banked the fire, Clara sat on the floor with her doll in her lap and asked the question Suyin had been dreading without knowing its shape. "If people don't believe it, do I have to stop calling you Mama?" It would have been easier if the child had screamed, or accused, or refused her. Instead, she asked it the way a person asks whether winter will kill the chickens, as if this too might simply be one more hard fact about the world. Suyin could not answer. She went into the small bedroom, shut the door, and finally opened the trunk she still had not truly unpacked. She folded her dresses, wrapped her mother's comb and stockings, laid the red ribbon on top. By midnight, the trunk was closed. By dawn, she had decided that leaving before the girl loved her properly would be kinder than letting Red Hollow teach Clara that affection itself was something the world could mock. When Eli came in from chopping wood, he saw the trunk by the door and understood at once. He stood there a long time. Then he did a thing she never forgot. He did not tell her to stay. He reached into his coat, took out a folded envelope, and set it on the table between them. "Train fare to Cheyenne," he said, "and enough beyond that to get you somewhere safer than a station bench." Suyin stared at the envelope as though it might strike her. "You are not angry?" Eli let out a breath that sounded old. "I am plenty of things. Angry isn't the useful one." The kitchen window was rimed with frost. The world outside was white and windless. He leaned one hand on the back of a chair. "When Anna died, this house went quiet in a way I did not know a house could. Clara stopped sleeping through the night, stopped laughing without checking if it was allowed, stopped asking for stories. Then your letter came." Suyin said nothing. He looked at the trunk, then at her. "You wrote about your mother dying when you were 14. You wrote that your brother still needed breakfast the next morning, so you got up and made it. Not because you were unbroken, because hungry children do not wait for grief to become convenient." His voice had gone rough. That line stayed with me. I thought, a woman who understood that kind of sorrow might know what to do with a little girl living beside it. Suyin felt her throat close. "I have not known what to do." "No," Eli said. "But Clara has slept with her lamp out 3 nights in a row. She has not done that in nearly 2 years. So perhaps you have done more than you know." He pushed the envelope toward her. "I will not keep you here with gratitude, and I will not ask you to stay out of pity. If you go with my thanks. If you stay, it must be because you choose this place knowing exactly what it is." Then he picked up his hat and walked outside, leaving her alone with the envelope, the trunk, and the sound of her own breathing. A little later she heard whispering from the front room. Clara was on the floor with a slate in her lap. She had copied 2 words over and over in crooked chalk. Suyin. Mama. Not one instead of the other. Both. The child was sounding them out under her breath, trying to fit them together, as if language itself might help her keep what she loved from being taken. Then Clara looked up and saw the trunk. Her whole face changed, not into anger, into panic. She rose so fast the slate tipped over. "Are you leaving before supper?" Suyin knelt in front of her. Clara's lower lip trembled once, and then she fought it down with visible effort. "I saved a thing," she said. From the pocket of her apron she pulled a little paper lantern, crooked and uneven, made from butcher paper and string, red pencil along the edges, a child's best imitation of beauty. "You said in your country people keep lights for the new year," Clara whispered, "so the good things can find the house. I made one for ours." That was the moment. Not the platform, not the schoolhouse, not even the packed trunk. That. A child trying with both hands to make a place in the house for someone who had arrived as a stranger. Suyin looked at the lantern, then at Clara, then at the shut door through which Eli had gone, because he was decent enough to let her choose in private, even if it broke him. And something inside her, which had been clenched since the train stopped in Red Hollow, finally loosened. She did not make a speech. She stood, carried the trunk back into the bedroom, opened it, and began at last to unpack. When Eli returned, the envelope was still on the table. The trunk was gone from the door, and above the stove, beside the old iron clock, hung Clara's crooked paper lantern. He looked at it once, then at Suyin. She said, "I cannot promise to become what the town wants me to be." "I don't want the town's version," he said quietly. She nodded. "I cannot promise I will not miss home every day." "I would worry if you didn't." She swallowed. "But I can stay through the winter, and the spring after it, and see what grows." Eli's face did not break open into some grand display of joy. It did something better. It steadied, as if a man who had been bracing for impact had finally been told he could set something heavy down. That night, Suyin made the best meal she could from what the pantry allowed. Broth, hand-cut noodles, and fried dumplings with more cabbage than pork, biscuits for Eli, tea strong enough to count as courage. Clara insisted the paper lantern be lit, though it was nothing more than candlelight trembling through thin paper. Eli moved Anna's cup from the back shelf, not hidden, not discarded, set gently beside the others, not replacing the dead, making room among the living. Snow fell through most of that night, and in the morning Red Hollow looked the same from the outside. Same boardwalks, same cold, same suspicious eyes in some windows. But the Turner cabin was different, because now Suyin's comb rested on the washstand. Her dress hung on the third peg. Her handwriting was pinned near the stove, where Clara had begged her to write good fortune words in Chinese. And when Eli came in carrying wood, he stamped snow from his boots, kissed Clara's head, and asked Suyin whether there was more tea. As if this arrangement, fragile and improbable as it still was, had survived one full night and meant to survive another. By the time the thaw came, Clara no longer asked whether she was allowed to say "Mama." She simply said it. In the yard, at the table, half asleep, full of laughter. Mrs. Bell began ordering extra tea without being asked. Two of the women from the schoolhouse still refused to look Suyin in the eye. 3 others started bringing mending, then staying for noodles. Eli learned how to eat dumplings, badly and with great sincerity. Clara learned to write her own name in English and copy the Chinese character Suyin chose for spring. And Suyin, who had once thought belonging would arrive all at once or not at all, learned the truth more slowly than that. It came in lamp smoke, in thaw water dripping from the porch roof, in a child's hand finding hers without fear, in a widower's habit of saving her the warmest place by the stove, in the moment she realized she no longer listened for the train every night. Years later, people in Red Hollow would say that Eli Turner brought a bride from China, and that, against all expectation, she made a life there. But that was not quite right. Suyin Zhao did not come west to be remade into someone easier for the town to understand. She came frightened, homesick, unwanted by some, misread by most. And she stayed long enough for one little girl, then one house, then one stubborn winter town to learn her real name. That was the beginning, not of a perfect life, of a true one.